Hello and welcome to Mysteries of Science. My name's Stevie and I'm the Deputy Editor of Science+Nature, the monthly magazine from the team behind The Week Junior.
And I'm Michael, the Junior Editor. On this podcast, we take a look at our favourite mysteries of science. These are the strange phenomena and bizarre events that have left scientists scratching their heads and, despite their best efforts, remain well and truly unsolved.
So tell us, Michael, where are we off to today?
Well, for this podcast, we're going high up into the Peruvian Andes in South America, more than 2,000 metres above sea level, to the ancient lost city of Machu Picchu.
Machu Picchu. Now, I've heard that name before. So what's so special about it?
Machu Picchu is one of the world's most spectacular places. In fact, it was actually named one of the 7 wonders of the modern world back in 2007. But it's also one of the most mysterious. Who really built this awesome citadel and what they used it for is something that has puzzled people for a long time.
Oh, I've heard lots of crazy theories about this place, including one that it said was built by aliens?
Well, let's take a trip to Peru and find some experts who can tell us the truth about this secret city in the sky. This is Mysteries of Science.
So, Michael, our mission today is to investigate who built Machu Picchu, how they did it, and what it was used for. I think we need to start with a quick history lesson. Machu Picchu is said to be an Incan city. Who were the Incas?
Well, thankfully, we've got a few experts here to explain it to us.
I'm Kim McQuarrie, and I am a writer, filmmaker, and anthropologist.
Kim has written 4 books about Peru and lived in the country for 5 years. Here he tells us a little bit about who the Incas were.
Yeah, the Incas began as a small ethnic group around the area of Cusco, down the southeastern part of the Andes, and Cusco is located at about 11,000 feet up in the Andes, so they were a mountain culture living in a valley among very rugged mountains, and the Andes Mountains is one of the longest mountain chains in the world. And they, in order to protect themselves, started a process of conquest of other nearby groups beginning in the 15th century, in the 1400s, early in the 1400s. And back then, probably for thousands of years, there's different villages and city-states and empires, and they were always under the threat of conquest. So it's either conquer or be conquered. So beginning in the 1400s, they began a period of conquest where eventually that led to creating the largest empire that ever existed in the New World.
Okay, so the Incas were people who built an empire in South America, in the Andes Mountains during the 15th century. But how long did this empire last for?
Well, it all started to come crashing down in 1532. That's when the Spanish invaded, and that eventually led to the downfall of the Inca Empire.
So where does Machu Picchu fit into this story?
Well, obviously the Incas always knew about Machu Picchu, but for the wider world, it didn't enter the story until 1911, when it was discovered, or rediscovered, by Hiram Bingham.
Who's Hiram Bingham?
Well, Stevie, do you know who Indiana Jones is?
Yes, I love those movies.
Well, some people say that Hiram Bingham was the real-life Indiana Jones, that famous adventuring archaeologist from the movies. In fact, there was a book written about Hiram Bingham called Cradle of God, The Story of Hiram Bingham, a Real-Life Indiana Jones. Here's its author, Dr. Christopher Heaney, to tell us a little bit more about Bingham and how he discovered Machu Picchu.
In 1909, during a trip to Peru, he was led to an Inca site named Choqquequirao, or the Cradle of Gold. At the time, some people thought Choqquequirao was the last city of the Incas, but when Bingham got back to the United States, a Peruvian anthropology student named Julio Cesar Tello sent him an article laying out the actual locations and probable locations of the true last cities of the Incas. And last cities of the Incas, that's what Bingham and Peruvian historians at the time called them. And this referred to the places where the Inca nobility and its last emperors retreated after the Spanish invasion in 1532. And these Inca sites were on the eastern slopes of the Andes, beyond Cusco, the Inca's imperial city. And the places that Bingham was looking for when he set off in 1911 were Vitcos and Vilcabamba. He was led first, though, to Machu Picchu, which changed his story and the history of the Incas as we know it.
Ooh, I've got the theme tune running around in my head at the moment. So what did Bingham see when he got to Machu Picchu? Were people still living there?
So it was mostly empty with the graves of 174 people who used to live there, but it wasn't actually completely abandoned. And as Christopher explains, there were actually 3 families still living there.
There were 3 families living there. The Richarte family, the Alvarez family, and the Fuentes family. And Bingham was led around the site by the son of the Richarte family. These families then worked for Bingham and the expedition in 1912 when he came back to excavate. One of them was then put in charge of caretaking of the site. But at a certain point, Machu Picchu becomes unpopulated again after Bingham's excavations. And there, I think, is a really interesting mystery about what happens when the archaeologists go away.
So it wasn't abandoned before Bingham visited, but it was after he left. Do we know why?
What the Bingham expedition had done was excavate the site and bring the remains, the human remains of 174 former subjects of the Incas from Machu Picchu to the United States. And I've found in journals from expedition members evidence that those families believed that if the expedition disturbed those remains, they could cause spiritual danger and hazard and damage to the people who still lived there. It could disrupt their health and their farming. And so one possible answer to the mystery of why Machu Picchu became unpopulated after Bingham is that its scientific excavation turned it from a still living place where the Incas were to a place that was dangerous, even scary, because its human remains had been removed.
So it was Bingham's expedition that kickstarted the scientific investigations into Machu Picchu that continue to this day and turned it from a place where people might have once lived into more of an archaeological site.
But just to be clear, Bingham wasn't the first person to discover Machu Picchu, was he?
He was perhaps not even the first foreigner. Peruvians had known about the site for centuries. It was on properties that were handed down between Inca families and then later between Spanish-Peruvian landowners. So probably the best thing to call him is the scientific discoverer, the person who first described it for publication and first took its picture, the famous pictures in National Geographic that set it on the road to becoming the archaeological and tourism superstar it is today.
Now, when Christopher calls Machu Picchu a tourism superstar, he isn't kidding. At one point before the pandemic, it was being visited by an average of 2,000 people a day.
Whoa. Wouldn't it be great to speak to someone from Peru who lives near Machu Picchu? Maybe they could give us a bit of an audio tour.
Well, Stevie, meet Miguel.
Hi guys, my name is Miguel Góngora. I am the co-founder of Evolution Treks Peru, a trekking company based in Cusco, Peru, on the way to Machu Picchu, the ancient city of the Inca. And I am here to tell you a few things about Machu Picchu.
Miguel was born and raised in Cusco, and with his trekking company takes lots of people up to Machu Picchu. Now, he has an incredible story about the very first time that he went there.
The first time I went to Machu Picchu was when I finished primary school, when I was 11 years old. We were taken there by our professors, our teachers, when we finished the 6th year of primary school. It was like a field trip, yeah? I remember that we took a train in the afternoon to get to Machu Picchu, and we slept at Machu Picchu town, which is located 30 minutes away from the archaeological site. It was just an adventure, you know, and it was just one night. I don't think that anyone slept that night because it was so cold and uncomfortable. And besides, when you have a group of kids don't want to sleep. They just want to talk and chit-chat all night. And that's what we did. The next morning, we went up to Machu Picchu in the morning, walking to see the sunrise. And we got there at 6 in the morning. And then we saw the sunrise at Machu Picchu. And I remember my first memory is just that I started wondering and asking questions about what really happened here, you know. And to be honest, ever since, and trying to figure out things, especially about the history that I was told and whether these things corresponded to reality or not. And ever since, I've dedicated like most of my life to trying to understand what Machu Picchu could have been like or what happened there.
That sounds like the best sleepover ever.
I know, a sleepover in Machu Picchu, can you imagine? And unsurprisingly, these experiences led Miguel to set up Evolution Treks Peru so he could share the wonders of Machu Picchu with other people. But he also wanted to make sure that these tours were run in a more ethical and sustainable way.
Yes, we are a pretty young company. We started only 5 years ago. And we are basically a co-op, an organization made up of tour guides, porters, and admin people. And we started the company because we wanted to create some change on the Inca Trail, because we thought that there were so many things that needed to be changed in there, in terms of the worker conditions of the porters, and to make real sustainable, to include women into the workforce as part of our workforce equity program. So that's how more or less Evolution was conceived.
So Miguel mentioned something called the Inca Trail. What is that exactly?
The Inca Trail is a very famous hiking destination here in South America. And it's an ancient Incan road made of stones, paved with stones, leads to Machu Picchu, starting at the 82 kilometer in the Sacred Valley. It goes through mountains, through mountain passes, up to 4,200 meters of altitude. And it goes through many different types of ecosystems, where you can see like different types of plants and flowers and birds. And along the way, we get to see many archaeological sites that speak loud of the history of the Incans. And even though they're just rocks, quote unquote, those places want their history to be known.
That sounds like an amazing walk.
And a tiring one too.
Yes, but definitely worth the effort, I imagine. So Miguel must be answering questions about Machu Picchu all the time. What's the question he gets asked the most?
How can I say that? Okay, let me see. Let me rephrase it. One of the main questions that people have is, was this place built by aliens? And what we want people to understand is that yes, it was built by aliens, because back in the 16th century, the people of the Americas were alien to the people in Europe. Yeah, so in that sense, yes. But if we speak about other galaxy beings, no.
So that's one possibility we can definitely rule out then. Machu Picchu was not built by aliens from a different world.
No, although astronaut theory, which is the idea that ancient sites were built by aliens from other worlds, is very popular. And that's because the building work was so advanced that people struggled to believe that the Incas living all those years ago could have been able to do it.
So what was so advanced about it?
So the stones lock together so precisely that you can't even fit a piece of paper through them. And also Machu Picchu sits on an active earthquake zone, and yet the buildings there withstood countless tremors, and they achieved all of this without any metal tools.
That is really impressive. How can we find out more about how they did it?
Well, it's tricky because a lot of our knowledge about Machu Picchu and the Incas is affected by the fact that they kept no written records, or at least not records that we could understand.
And that's one of the most fascinating things that puzzles scientists even nowadays. The question of a system of recording information in the ancient South American cultures. It seems that the Inca did not have a writing system the way we know it, and they instead were carrying with them some form of recording information that was completely different from what the Western civilizations had invented. Yeah, and it was lost. Yeah. And that has scientists nowadays are looking for that. for clues about understanding the way the Inca used to record information. So, and that system, just so you guys can Google it, is called the Quipu system. KHIPU. Yeah, the Quipu system. There is a whole department, I think, at Harvard University devoted to understanding and deciphering this Quipu.
So instead of writing down words on pieces of paper, they would tie different knots into rope. And so that would be how they recorded information.
So trying to understand and translate these knots is one of the mysteries of Machu Picchu that scientists are working on. But that doesn't mean we don't know anything about why Machu Picchu was built, does it? I mean, people have been studying this place for more than 100 years now, since Bingham found it in 1911. We must have figured out something.
We have. So despite the mysteries of how the Incas recorded their information, we've been able to find out some stuff thanks to archaeological work and also stories that were passed down through the generations. So we do actually have some idea of which Inca built Machu Picchu, why they did it, and what people did there. And it all has to do with one Inca ruler called Pachacuti. Now, do you know what that name means, Stevie? Pachacuti?
What?
Earthshaker.
That's an awesome name.
Right, and as Kim explains, it was actually his conquests that led to the creation of Machu Picchu.
And what he began to do is if he conquered an area, he would erect kind of a monument and sacred site, a city. And so he first created the citadel Pisac, which was outside of Cusco in that area that he conquered. Then he moved further away and he conquered another area and he erected a town called, or a fortress called Ollantaytambo. And then he went over a mountain pass and started going down the Amazon jungle, and he conquered an area now called the area of Vilcabamba. And when he subdued that area, he decided to build a resort, fortress, sacred site commemorating his conquest. And that is what we now know as Machu Picchu.
So Machu Picchu was a sacred site built by an Incan ruler called Pachacuti, the Earthshaker, to commemorate one of his conquests. It was both a royal retreat and also a sacred site for religious ceremonies. What
sort of ceremonies happened there?
Well, the Incas worshipped the sun and the mountains, and it's thought that many of the buildings and stones around Machu Picchu, including one particularly famous stone called the Hitching Post of the Sun, were designed to act as sort of astronomical clocks, so they would cast shadows that corresponded to the equinoxes, which is when the day and night were of equal length. Here's one explorer who can tell us a little bit more about it.
My name's Albert Lin. I'm an explorer and a scientist. I am also host of the television show Lost Cities with Albert Lin, which is on National Geographic.
So, like many of us, Albert is fascinated by Machu Picchu.
I think when it comes to archaeological pictures that make you think, wow, that's out there, you know? Machu Picchu is one of them. The pyramids, right? The images of Stonehenge, the image of the Titanic at the bottom of the sea, and then you have Machu Picchu rising up out of the mountains, right?
When he visited the site, Albert got to go up to a part of Machu Picchu where most people aren't allowed to go, and came face to face with the Hitching Post of the Sun.
You get right up to the top. There's an apex on the top of the whole site where nobody's really allowed to go anymore. I don't know how, but we got permission to go, and there's nobody that really gets to get up to this very top part of the site. But there's this stone right at the top, sort of almost jetting out right into the sky, pointed straight at the highest mountain in the surrounding mountains that sort of overlook the site of Machu Picchu. And this astronomical clock that they think is sort of pointed straight up, carved out of the highest stone out of the bedrock. Being, you know, the sunstone or the hitching post, as they call it, to the sun, you can feel that you're standing in the exact spot where several hundred years ago some high priest or some Inca rulers stood performing the ceremonies that they thought would connect them closer to, you know, their ancestors or their gods. They believed they came from the mountains. They were literally born of the mountains. So their rituals point towards the mountains, right? They think that they can actually speak to the dead through these connections.
Okay, so that answers some of our questions. We know who built Machu Picchu, the Inca ruler Pachacuti. We know why they did it, to commemorate one of their conquests and hold religious ceremonies. And we know what some of these ceremonies entailed, worshipping the sun and the mountains. But that's not the whole story, is it? I know scientists are still studying Machu Picchu today, trying to find out more about it. So what are they looking for, and what have they found?
I'm Dominika Sieczkowska. I'm archaeologist from University of Warsaw in Poland. I work at the Center for Andean Studies. I work in Machu Picchu. We are working in ritual bath systems, and we are excavating one of the archaeological sites that it's called Chalchabamba.
So Dominika worked with local Peruvian archaeologists using something called LiDAR, which allowed them to uncover hidden structures in the ceremonial site near Machu Picchu called Chalchabamba.
Yes, LiDAR is like a game changer because you can discover basically everything that is under the vegetation without cutting the trees, without imagine to cut whole archaeological park. It's impossible to do that. So with the LiDAR we can see what it's under this vegetation. So it's much more faster and easier to work right now.
Wow, that's impressive, and it sounds pretty high tech. So using this technology, Dominika and her colleagues have made a new discovery which potentially tells us more about how Inca people behaved and how important Machu Picchu was to them.
And this isn't the only new discovery that archaeologists have made in recent months. It's also been suggested that Machu Picchu isn't really called Machu Picchu, but might actually have another name.
Well, it's interesting, and we're learning more about it year by year. First, that Machu Picchu isn't actually Machu Picchu. Machu Picchu is probably the name of the mountain above the site itself. A Peruvian researcher, historian named Donato Amado in the last few years has been following this Inca site through the colonial documents, and he's learned that the site itself was probably named Pichu or Huayna Picchu or the young Pichu, and it was when Bingham got there, though, he had been led there by Peruvians who knew where the site was and had been visiting it for years. And he believed that this site's name was Machu Picchu because of what some people told him and not others.
So new buildings, a new name. It sounds like we've only just scratched the surface of what there is to know about Machu Picchu.
Absolutely, and this is something that all of our experts said. There's still so much left to discover, and maybe even you could be the ones to discover it.
Yes, exactly. My life is not enough to discover everything, so we need much more new archaeologists that are interested in working in the Andes, because it's not only Machu Picchu. With this new technology, we can work everywhere and discover many new things.
I would just say that, for I know this is for those listening who have any inclination or interest in archaeology or history or the Amazon jungle, ancient empires, there's so much left to be discovered that I always say about Peru is like this giant museum, open-air museum. And even though people have been doing archaeology there and conducting scientific expeditions there for the last 150 years or so, they've probably only discovered maybe at best a tenth of what there is to be discovered in these areas. They're still very remote, very unexplored. There's still native groups in these areas that are uncontacted. And this is where the area of Machu Picchu is today, or in that region. So there's a lot of exploration to be done. There's a lot of science to be done. And there's a lot of mysteries that are to be explored and explained hopefully by some of you listening.
So there you have it, folks. We're all explorers. We'd love to hear your theories about Machu Picchu and maybe even tell us any discoveries you've made. Send us a video or a voice note to hello@science-nature.co.uk and you could feature in a future episode. Here's one message we got from Rosie.
Hi Science and Nature, I'm Rosie. I think you should do a podcast on what happened to the Roanoke colony because it's definitely a mystery.
That's a great suggestion. We've written about the Roanoke colony in issue 26 of the magazine, and I think it would make a great episode for our podcast.
Definitely. And don't forget, we'll be back in 2 weeks' time for our next episode, which is all about children who have been raised by animals.
Children who have been raised by animals? How is that possible?
Well, you're not the only one wondering that, Stevie. Here's a clip that was sent in by Samuel.
how is it possible for animals to raise children? I mean, they can't actually communicate to their children like talking, but I guess they can use sign language, but how would they learn it? I mean, they're only animals, and it just seems impossible. Please, can you answer this question? Bye.
Well, Samuel, tune in 2 weeks' time and we'll both hopefully have our question answered. Until then, stay curious.
Thanks for listening to The Week Junior Show, which is made by the same people that make The Week Junior magazine. You can get a free trial of The Week Junior by heading to theweekjunior.co.uk/podcast and using the code podcast at checkout.